We've all had one of those days. We think we're giving a great lecture, but some students in the class just don't seem engaged. They are there physically, but not mentally. Maybe it's because they didn't get any sleep last night. Maybe they are worried about their job or their kids, or maybe they just aren't in the mood to listen. It happens to every student, and as instructors, we know they'll regret it. Because of this, I think it's important to give your students access to your lecture outside of class so they can review what you've discussed in class. A great way to do this other than videotape your lecture is to create short animated lecture videos. Whatever you want your students to learn, give them access to it outside of class. Consider creating lecture videos they can access. To get started, choose only 1 or 2 learning objectives. Then create a lecture video about the learning objective. Then upload the video to either YouTube or to the WCTC server and give your students the link so they can have access to it even outside of class. One great software you can use to create animated videos is Camtasia Studio. There are many cool things you can do with Camtasia Studio that will make your students better learners. To be a better learner, students need to think on their own, but we know the challenge is to keep them engaged. If they are engaged, they will be motivated to learn. If they are motivated to learn, they will succeed. When students are told exactly what they need to learn to be successful and they have 24 access to your lecture material, I believe they have a higher chance of success. So give your students access to your lectures. They want to hear from you and not just from a textbook. This is Chapter 14, Module 2, Major Functions of the Cerebrum and the Limbic System. The learning objectives of this module are 1. Identify the major anatomical subdivisions and functions of the cerebrum, and 2. Identify the main components of the limbic system and specify the locations and functions of each. The cerebrum is the largest area of the brain and contains motor, sensory, and association areas. Conscious thoughts and all intellectual functions originate in the cerebral hemispheres. The cerebrum is involved in the processing of somatic, sensory, and motor information. Gray matter in the cerebrum. Each cerebral hemisphere can be divided into lobes named after the overlying bones of the skull. On each hemisphere, the central sulcus, a deep groove, divides the anterior frontal lobe from the more posterior parietal lobe. The lateral sulcus is a horizontal groove that separates the frontal lobe from the temporal lobe. The central sulcus of the cerebral cortex separates the motor and sensory areas of the cortex. Immediately anterior to the central sulcus is the precentral gyrus. This gyrus contains the primary motor cortex, where voluntary commands to skeletal muscles are generated. This is Chapter 25, Module 2, Glycolysis, the TCA cycle, and the electron transport system. The learning objectives of this module are glycolysis. Glycolysis is the breakdown of glucose to pyruvic acid. In this process, glucose, which is a 6-carbon compound, will break into 2 3-carbon compounds of pyruvic acid. Pyruvic acid then loses a hydrogen. The citric acid cycle will take place in the matrix of the mitochondria. The function of the citric acid cycle is to remove hydrogen atoms from organic molecules and transfer them to coenzymes. These coenzymes are NAD and FAD. The electron will then be passed from one cytochrome to the next in small steps. At the last cytochrome, at the end of the electron transport system, an oxygen atom accepts the electron and will use its energy to combine the oxygen and hydrogen ions to form water. This segment is on the flow of blood through the heart. We'll draw the left side of the heart. This is the left atrium, and this is the left ventricle. Okay, the right side of the heart I've drawn blue. Once this deoxygenated blood enters into the right atrium, it will flow through a broad opening into the right ventricle. It has to pass through a valve, which is called... Chapter 4, Module 2, Intro to Connective Tissues. The learning objectives of this module are 1. Describe... Connective tissue proper contains a syrupy, viscous ground substance with up to 3 different types of extracellular proteins and a variety of specialized cells.